Dello heavy-duty engine oils. Proven engine protection at prices you can rely on, giving you even more reasons to choose Dello. Today we're here to talk about yet another aspect of the business that's being changed by technology. We're talking about the storage of personal information in the case of an accident. And today we're here to talk to a company called Twiceme, who's really running at the forefront of technology in this area. So my first question is, can you just, for the audience, give us a quick overview as to what Twiceme is and what you guys do?
Yeah, 100%. So starting from the beginning, the origins of the company are actually in the military. So the company was founded not by myself, but by ex-military guys who noticed the need when they were out in the world on their missions of basically getting essential information about a person in an accident. So they would be out in training or on the battlefield and obviously witnessing people getting hurt and experiencing the helplessness that is connected to not being able to do everything you can to help them. So that's sort of where the founding idea of the company came about. And we used to have in the army, in certain places of the world, maybe you still do, but for the most part, the dog tags we used to have are not being used anymore. So at that point, they were actually writing with Sharpie pens or ballpoint pens on the arm or on the chest of the person. So they figured there must be a better way to access information about a person so we can help faster. So they started going out and verifying this need with ambulance personnel and EMTs and stuff like that. And it turns out it's actually a huge problem out there. So that was sort of the starting point of Twiceme that led us to incorporate in 2017. And essentially what Twiceme does is it solves this problem of not knowing who the person is. When you get to the scene of an accident, somebody's lying there, what are their names, medical conditions, all this type of information that you need in that situation is not available. So Twiceme is a small chip that is integrated into personal protective equipment. So think about helmets or harnesses or workwear, etc., that connects to any smartphone to give you access to that essential information. So that was the sort of founding promise that kicked off Twiceme as it is today. And then sort of from there, we branched into the outdoor segments where within biking, skiing, motorbikes, in protective gear, and also, of course, in the industrial segment where we're growing pretty quickly at the moment. And we've sort of grown from that initial product of giving essential information in an accident situation to also include more of the prevention stuff. So checking to make sure that the equipment is good, storing those logs of your inspections of the product, etc., storing worker certifications or training records or that sort of stuff as well. So essentially, it's a technology that gives you access to important information to improve safety. That's the gist of it.
So you kind of started to get into it. Could you expound a little bit on what sort of applications in kind of the construction industry you guys are starting to utilize this technology?
Yeah, sure. So we started, like I said, in the sports segments. And then during COVID, a lot of these brands pulled the handbrake on innovation. So we were actually sort of pulled into the industrial segment at first from demand in the market. And at first it was more sort of general contracting, that sort of stuff, concrete workers that wanted the technology. But then quite quickly we started expanding to everything from mining to maritime industry to arborists to general contracting, firefighters. So there's really no limit to where we can go in terms of the different segments. And we are in all these segments today. We have about 30 different brands of personal protective equipment on board. We have millions of products in the market, hundreds of different helmet models and equipment models. So it's starting to expand to quite a few different segments in the market already.
Gotcha. So I guess my question is, how is the information accessed? Because in my mind, this could go one of two ways. It's very simple, almost like a QR code where your phone's just going to react when you put it up next to it. Or the alternative in my mind is I'm going to have to sit there, a paramedic rolls up and he's got to wait for an app to download on his phone because he doesn't have it on his phone, or there's some sort of special wand he has to have. So how easy is it to actually access the information from the chip?
Yes, it's super easy. If you have the application, you just put the phone, basically, I have a Studson helmet right here. for example. So below this symbol is where the technology is located. So what you do is you just put your phone on there and you get the information. And that can actually be done both with and without the application. So if you just pull out any smartphone and put that on that symbol, you access the information about the person wearing that helmet, basically.
Gotcha. Now, my next question is, do you have the ability to potentially lock up the information? And I think about this in two ways. If we're talking about medical information, I come at it from the angle of, if you start to put more sensitive information, obviously things like your emergency contact, whether or not you're a diabetic or you have seizures, stuff like that isn't necessarily, you're worried about that being protected. But if you might get into storing social security numbers or anything like that, do you have the ability to kind of lock some of that information away?
Yeah, good question. So sort of by design, Twiceme is open to everyone at close proximity. But the way we've designed the technology is that all of the personal information, first of all, is uploaded at your own discretion and within your own control. So you have the option to put, how much or how little information as you want on that particular piece of equipment. So you're in control of what information goes on there, knowing that the more information we have in these situations where something happens, or we go through an inspection, or whatever it might be, the better. But so that's the sort of first line of defense. You only put what you sort of feel confident putting on there. And that sort of goes into the second part as well, that none of this information is stored in any cloud. It is just locally stored in your equipment. We as a company, we can't access that. We can't even see that information. Studson, in this case, they can't see that information. That is just the equivalent of writing it on a piece of paper and putting it in your pocket is as much online, so to speak. So that's how we've sort of limited the potential dissemination or wrongful dissemination of this information. It's really secure in that spot. But you can go up, anybody can go up, and that's sort of what it's designed to do. Anybody can go up and put their phone on that symbol and get the information, because in an emergency, that is critical that we can quickly get information about the person, to make inspections easier, all these type of things. It needs to be accessible, the information. So it's not limited in that sense, but in the terms of, connected to a cloud or anything, it's just locally stored, completely offline at your own control, basically.
The other direction I go with kind of the ability to lock up information isn't necessarily from the standpoint of not being able to access it or see it, but more from a who can edit it standpoint. And where I go mentally there is, if we had these chips incorporated onto pieces of equipment where we're keeping maintenance logs, or safety equipment where we're logging safety checks that were performed, you don't want anyone to just be able to access that and go in and make an edit to the information. Is it possible to only store the information and lock it so that only certain people can change that information? But before we get into that, I want to take a second to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Chevron Lubricants.
These cranes work around the clock for months at a time. If one of these engines ever goes down, it costs more than our reputation. Switching to Delo 600 ADF, it's been a game changer. We've had no issues with clogged DPFs. No regen lights, no cleaning, no replacements, nothing. This oil goes beyond anything we've ever used. I choose proven protection that keeps our cranes on the job. I choose Delo 600 ADF.
Is it possible to only store the information and lock it so that only certain people can change that information?
Yeah, it's also a good question. And so in those instances, we have the ability to actually, it is a checklist that you sign off and file. So that sort of keeps it on the record. Obviously, you can make a mistake, but then your name is on there and you've signed it. So that's one line of defense. But with regards to your other point of sort of overwriting data and stuff like that, that's a good example of how we can work with offline data in terms of your personal information, but we can store some anonymized things connected to the product in the cloud. And that gives us the ability to work with access control. So for example, maybe only inspectors or safety personnel can access or edit certain parts of the protocol, whilst keeping all the personal data completely safe and in the hands of you. So that's how we think about storing that data and how we think about data in general.
So my final question for you is kind of just a personal speculation. Where do you see this technology kind of evolving and going in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, first of all, the whole industry is moving towards using more and more of these types of technologies or just digital technology in general. But what we see among general contractors or in the industry here is that there's still quite a long way to go. So that's sort of the challenge. But at the same time, we're seeing the pace ramp up quite dramatically. So even when we started in 2019, it was a lot harder of a sell to get contractors on board, get workers on board to actually start using this. And we see a whole different picture today where there's actually a lot less of this initial resilience that we saw then. So it is beginning to change, first of all. But I do think it's really important to, when moving from sort of pen and paper or moving to these sort of older methods to newer methods, that it's very simple to use. There's a lot of sort of high technology that's a lot of times really cool and can create a value, but it's quite costly, quite expensive, and quite difficult to sort of onboard your team into a large system that sort of does everything. And where we see a gap in the market is really that super simple, handheld, in the field, should be almost fun to use it, right? Fun to be a part of this thing and work with safety. So that's really important, first of all. And then further down the line, I do see more connectedness, of course. But I think there's also a challenge in that a lot of people feel like it's uncomfortable to be tracked and these sort of stuff. So, yeah, a brief answer to your question, I think it needs to be really simple to use, simple to adopt, and it needs to improve sort of the efficiency in the organization. And, safety is a really good place to start because there's a lot of things that need to be done. And I think technology in that world can really make a difference. So definitely moving to more digital technologies, but keeping them as simple as possible for the biggest effect possible is sort of, I guess, my briefest version of the answer.
Yeah. No, this is fascinating stuff. I do have a couple thoughts. First of all, I do feel like as the younger generations continue to move into this industry, you're getting the old guard changing out, and the new guard isn't scared of this stuff because they just kind of grew up with it and understand how it works instead of it being this mystical thing to some of the older generations. And so I do agree. I think the adoption of the technology will rapidly take off as we continue into the future. And then the other thought I had is I understand the kind of weird feeling of being tracked, but the flip side is I could see this being extremely helpful in like the mining industry, where if you have an NFC reader somewhere, and this may already be being used in the mining industry for all I know, but it's tracking everyone that's going into that mine. And it automatically, because your chip has it has all of their medical information, all of their emergency contact information, and it's logging who is in that mine. And at the end of the day, when everyone's doing their shift change, it's automatically tracking everyone that comes back out of that mine and kind of taking them off of the list. I could see a lot of situations where you have these job sites where you need to keep tight controls on who is in a place and who is not in a place. This could be really effective, and you have a lot less room for error because it's not a person doing the tracking. It's all just automated at this point.
Yeah, I 100% agree to your first point there of the younger generation coming in and having a different sort of mindset to, I think, safety in general. First of all, we do see some of the older generation being a bit more cowboys about it, and it's kind of not so cool. Today, it's changing quite rapidly that you need to be a sort of serious employer. You need to take safety extremely seriously, and that comes with everything from having the best protection out there to utilizing all the technologies that are sort of at hand to improve safety. So it's becoming, maybe it's cool is the wrong word, but it's becoming a lot more accepted to go through these processes to improve safety for all of us. You want to get home from the work site at the end of the day. It's your job. You're not supposed to be at a higher risk just because you work in that industry. So I think that's absolutely a valid point. And to your second question, I think, again, it's, how we sort of avoid that pitfall and the suspicion that often comes with new technology is to keep it very simple. These things that you're talking about are things we're looking into. First step for us is getting that widespread adoption and sort of getting people involved in the system, because then we can start to make a difference. But then we have a ton of stuff in the pipeline. We're going to release some now at NFC in 2 weeks. That's going to start working a bit more in this direction and sort of giving more of an overview of your work sites, your teams, without going in on a personal level and tracking people in their every move. But there's a middle way where it's like you're being tracked every second of every day, or like you say, you're being checked in and out. there's a huge difference between the two. And I think keeping it simple, keeping it sort of in a way that everybody can understand what's happening, in control of the user, that sort of stuff is really important in digitizing your workplace to improve safety. So we're taking steps in this direction and looking at the market and seeing whether there are different opportunities. But yeah, these things that you're alluding to are super interesting to us as well.
Well, Christian, thank you so much for the time today and kind of walking us through the technology and kind of what's kind of new on the forefront of our industry. This is really interesting. Well, thank you again for Christian coming on the show to talk to us a bit about the technology that Twiceme is bringing to the table when it comes to storing personal information in the event of an emergency. As you can see, our landscape is changing very rapidly as technology works its way into more and more facets of the industry. And I gotta say, it's pretty awesome to watch take place. So as always, I hope this helps you in your business. We'll catch you on the next episode of The Dirt.